Malawi back in 2009, that was his plan from the start, kill Americans. Similar to Benghazi 2012, 3 years after that, team leader on the ground, he's not being listened to. So Scott, he wants to do everything more traditionally GRS, which I totally agree with. We don't know this guy, we've never met this guy, so I want to search him. I want to get hands on this dude personally, right? And that's not what was going to happen. And so they're told to look away or stand off and let them through. And they come outside and they form this little line. Car pulls up and he realizes, something is not right about this dude. Starts barking commands, pointing guns.
Obviously, he spoke to Bosnia a little bit, but is there any other specific operations or anything that kind of stuck out before, you moved into your time for contracting and everything?
Oh, yeah, there was a lot of things, but yeah. So I'll just say this: there were so many things that we were involved with. So everybody, I guess, in that same mindset that wants to do these kind of things, right? You want to have a purpose and you just don't want to be in the military. You want to actually be doing something. You want a mission. And so when you get, and then so through the 80s, not a whole lot going on, but there's some things that people are early 80s, got grenaded in 83. Then at the back end of that, you got 89, Just Cause in Panama and all that stuff. And then during the 80s too, there's a lot of what they used, what did they call that? Small intensity conflicts, right, was the thing at the time. So there's things happening, but very few people are involved with it. A lot of SF groups are involved with some things. Some people in those groups are involved with it, but it's small intensity stuff, so not a lot of people are exposed to it. But that's what we're chasing, right? We're chasing that excitement, right? So we finally get there for most of us. And then it's a matter of there's so much going on because now you're in the loop, right? And pretty much your week revolves around your first intel brief of the week on Monday, right? You get, and that kind of tailors your training for the week. This is what we're going to do. Okay, that's what we might be doing. Let's train that way this week. And then throughout the week, you get intel updates, just all over the world. You're in the loop on everything that's going on. And so that there is nothing lost on you on why you're there and what's going on. So when I showed up there was on the backside of the Desert Storm stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So there's guys that are injured, wheeling themselves around in wheelchairs, and guys in back braces and crutches and stuff. And so when you get there, like, oh shit, these guys are in it.
Yeah, they hit hard.
This is what I asked for, right? All right, let's do it, right? And when's my turn, right? And yeah, there's plenty of stuff going on. So you definitely, so it's not all direct action, kicking in doors, and that's the fun stuff. But it's not all that. It's a lot of clandestine work. It's protective operations work. It's a lot of things. And so I was fortunate enough to be able to do most of that. So I was even on a sniper team for a while. And not everybody even wants to do that at the unit. And a lot of guys are probably better off that they didn't because they're just too amped up, right? Yeah. They're just door kickers. They just want to blow shit up. And all that kind of crap. That's what's fine. And that's the thing about that place. It's like, yeah, absolutely. You're awesome at that. Just keep doing it.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, don't hurt my feelings. Like, you're not going to be a sniper. Okay.
I'll go kick some fucking doors.
Yeah. But those guys who want to be snipers, that's part of them too. That's what they want to do too. And they've probably done it before. Or a lot of times the best snipers in general, grew up that way. Like, I've been hunting all my life, right? Yeah. Walk sideways because they were walking on the hills of West Virginia.
Gun, loved it. Yeah.
Yeah. I've been shooting squirrels since I was knee-high or a grasshopper, right? It's like, okay, good for you.
Yeah.
It's like, so typically those guys who end up in those roles anyway. And I had an opportunity to do that. But so if you do, there's always little selection things that you go through internally. Like, well, we'll see if you're fit. So it'll be the sniper guys, sniper teams that are like, do we want to sit sit in a small room in a hindsight with you for, yeah, are you or not?
Yeah.
Yeah, or because you can't be too high strung and you can't be, you have a time and place for all that stuff, right? So there's that. I was fortunate enough to do that. Got on a team for a little bit. There's like even the protective operations stuff. Not everybody does that either because not everybody wants to do that, and not everybody's fit to do that. It's like the Ranger Smash thing, right? You just have those Ranger Smash dudes. It's like, okay, Roger that. We'll keep you on this team over here. And then those that can that want to do it, are good at it. Then yeah, you get opportunities to do that too. Back in the day in Desert Storm, Schwarzkopf's detail in the desert, you had unit guys protecting them. Typically, it's like senior level commanders like that, or ambassadors and those kind of folks. Augment Secret Service on overseas trips by the president and all that kind of stuff. But not everybody's cut out for that, and that's the thing about that. If you are, good. If you're not, good. That's good enough. If you don't want to do it, that's fine. This isn't our primary mission. We're all here for the primary mission. That's direct action and hostage rescue and all that stuff. And which is probably the coolest shit ever.
Yeah, no doubt.
But that's not always everything that's going on. So you don't lose sight of that there is a purpose and a mission, and we were constantly getting ready for deployment, deployed. So there's isolation that is involved in some of those things too. So, and when you're gone, you're gone. You don't know where you're going when you get the alert, unless you're at work when it happens, because that happens. Sometimes you go to work for a day and you don't come home for dinner. And at one point, your family's going to be notified if you have people waiting on you outside the gate. You can be a little late for dinner, but that's not right away. That's like, so whoever that is, I mean, at one point, someone's going to tell them, but so there's a support apparatus also, which is the best ever. And everybody's just under that understanding. Everybody at the time, if you have family, as soon as you get there onto a squadron, you get briefed by everybody from the unit commander and on down. And they make it pretty clear, just like they did to us at one point. And they're like, you're here, you made it, and this is what you're going to be doing 24/7 until the day you leave. And this is your priority in life. Regardless of what you think else's priority, this is it. And for us, we're like, well, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right? But for family members might think,
they got selected too.
What about me, right? It's like, well, I'd like to put you first, but guess what's first? It sucks to be you because I'm exactly where I want to be. Yeah. But I mean, that's an understanding by that too. And I do tell guys that have volunteered later on, it's like if they're married and they have family and all that stuff, you got to be all in. Let them know you're not going to be available, period. And they're not going to always know what you're doing. So you got to be all in. Otherwise, you're not going to make it either. If that's your concern, and it happens eventually too. Some guys just, whether it's a relationship or whatever it is, it's like, okay, well, just be honest with us. Are you ready to go or not? If not, then stay here, take care of business. If you're ever ready again, let's do it. Get back on the train. If not, okay, no worries, no harm, no foul. It's nice knowing you, nice working with you.
Yeah, and
we'll see you one day down the road, right? Hopefully, we'll pass you one day. When we're on our way, to a cool mission, right?
And then you'll let me right through because so let me ask that then. Highlighting, we'll go back to your time specifically in a sec, but I think a lot of people, you'll see this pop up on social media, time and time again that U.S. Special Forces, whether it's some of the contractors, but also specific like some of the special teams directly. They'll be in places like Africa. They'll be in places like, Asia, places like South America. Can you kind of highlight, because a lot of people, I mean, Africa is a really interesting one where, we have more going on there than people think about, and you're kind of touching it there.
Yeah.
Like, can you maybe speak to that? Like, what is the reality of, a lot of these teams still operating, even if we don't think, not just the Middle East, but a lot more around the world?
Oh yeah. So, well, apparently we don't have any armed forces in harm's way. Active combat,
that's
right?
exactly what I mean. Yeah.
So a lot of that stuff is not publicized for good reason, but because they're not that it needs to be like clandestine or covert or something like that. Not that it needs to be, suppressed for those reasons. Because if it is, then you won't hear about it. But a lot of times, like almost who pays attention? Who cares? If you're back here in the States, what matters to me is what I'm doing outside my door, So a lot of things are in the market or in the news or in news or some sort of format where it is talked about, but you have to be in those, you have to be sourcing those kind of resources, right? News, information, all that stuff. And usually that's the thing too. Everybody kind of likes their thing, and that's the only news they get is this one spot, and you get whatever they want to disclose to you. But there are a lot of good programs always going on everywhere. It's like, so my time in, it was, it's a global responsibility, right? And so you're globally everywhere. So that was one of the things in the recruiting pitch too, which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's like, this is our training ground. It's a picture of the world. It's like, I love this already.
Yeah.
So it just throw it out there and reel you in, right? But not, it's like, so they don't want you to want to be there, right? They give it to you straight. It's like, that's what we do. And if you don't grasp the concept, if you're not willing to do that, then that's okay. It's not for everybody. And some people for the briefing I went to as well, for me, it was like, okay, yep, that's exactly what I wanted to do. It's like, I've been telling you that's what I want to do this whole time, right?
I've been saying it since the beginning.
Yeah. And then there's some people in that audience that are like, well, maybe that's not for me. Because the Army in general is already enough, right? Or they allow, I think there was some family members in there too. So you're allowed to bring a spouse or something like that to the briefing, and they get to ask questions too. It's like, how often?
Really?
Yeah, and they're asked. Some people do, and I remember this one, a couple of them in this one briefing I attended, and they asked the questions: How long are you gone? Because they know generally how often their husbands are deployed for training and everything else. Right? They're gone a lot, just in the regular Army stuff, daily activity stuff. So they had that understanding, but there's usually a preparation time where they get some information, and then then they're not as secretive about what's happening. So it's like, I'm going to be gone, but I'll be back on this date, right? I'm going over here, I'm doing this, and I'm coming back on this date. So in that briefing, I remember this one woman was asking that question: how often are they gone and stuff like that? Like give me an idea what daily life is. And they tell them, it's like, well, a lot of times you won't know when your husband is gone and why he's gone and when he'll be back. He'll be back. And then she's like, okay. Like, so, I mean, but where do you go? I mean, where would he go? What would he be doing? It's like, well, you won't always know that until he comes back. And if that's what he chooses to tell you, then you'll know. And of course, all the guys are, like, there's no, it's safer. It's literally safer for them not to know as much as possible for their own mental health.
Yeah.
But also for, OPSEC, COMSEC, and all that other stuff. And that's that understanding that they have too, if they're getting into this thing. And I told guys that too. I was like, I've seen it work and I've seen it fail. It all depends on if you're in it together, like 100%. then it'll be okay. It's fine. It'll be fun for everybody, right? But it's not for everybody. It's just bottom line what it is. And they don't make it a secret. They tell you from the start, it's not for everybody. This is what we're doing. We're not going to lie to you. We're going to tell you like it is. And at one point you feel like it's not for you anymore, then just say so.
Yeah, just
out
the door.
Yeah. And these are the standards, and these are the standards, and these are the standards. You either meet it or you don't, you know? And if you don't, then don't come crying to me. That's on you, right?
So let me ask now, I guess we haven't really had a story specific like this. I'm interested to hear if any stick out in your mind. But Delta's pretty notorious for hostage rescue ability. I mean, that's, you know, A game. But we really, for all operatives we had on, really, and you haven't had any specific operations stick out. So I'm curious if there's any during your time there that you could point to or really showcase why Delta has essentially perfected that art.
Well, I'll tell you about one that didn't go, that almost went.
Only that.
So, and they made a movie about the singer that was hired to sing at an embassy down in Peru. I want to say it was either Japan's embassy, or it could have been even China's embassy, but it was down in Peru. And so the singer goes down there, and she's hired to sing at this gala event, big embassy event. And the name of the movie escapes me, but the terrorist organization that was down there at the time goes to this event, takes over the embassy. Everybody's a hostage. And there were Americans from the American embassy there. So if there's Americans involved, then we get involved. So that was one of the most exciting things of that and Mogadishu, one of the most exciting things that I've been called out on and eventually didn't go. But that was going to be cool, right? So we go down there, get set up. As we're getting set up, as we're training up, as we're getting ready to go rescue our Americans and everybody in the embassy. At one point, it was a pretty good long siege afterwards. But at the beginning, they eventually, at one point, whatever generated that, they're told, or the terrorists released the Americans. They released the Americans, and I think Germans or there are a couple of countries. It was Western countries they didn't want to pick a fight with.
Yeah,
right?
they knew they were going to get their shit.
Okay, let's get rid of the Americans. We don't want that one, right? Because we heard they got these guys, right? Mm-hmm. So there was a couple of Western countries that were released, and as soon as that happened, it's like, because that happened a lot. So it's like it's like an attack dog, right?
Yeah, they know
it's good. It's like, yes, you get this call out mission, and it's race to work and see what's going on. What is it this time, right? And you get the dump, everybody sits down, you get the briefing. It's like, yes, this is it, right? This is the one. This is, oh man, it's so cool. Run to the, breaching shed and start building charges and stuff like that, and just jacking mags and getting your shit ready and getting ready to go out on another call out. And then you wait for National Command Authority to give you the go, and then launch, go get it, right? And so many times, that one included. It's like, well, good news, bad news. Good news, they released the Americans. Bad news is, well, we're not going anywhere. It's like, oh, son of a bitch. But there's a lot of good stuff. So during the 90s too, a lot of things that people don't know is going on was the no-fly zone post Desert Storm, right? We seal off, we chop Iraq in thirds, and there's a southern no-fly zone and a northern no-fly zone. And we're part of the NATO that's doing that. So it's mostly Americans flying around, enforcing the no-fly zone. Protecting north of the Green Line, all the Kurds up north, and then Kuwait down south. And so helicopters flying around. Guess what happens to helicopters? They fall out of the sky randomly. It just happens. So there was a couple of helicopter crashes during
it's
that
like one
time
of those
frame.
unaerodynamic things. Like the way it works, it's like there was like, I don't even know how they go, but they go.
Yeah. And if you mess around with them enough, you're gonna fall out of the sky again, right? So that did happen. So a couple of those missions, they were still, or we were as a U.S. We were still looking for scuds in Iraq and missile silos and all that kind of stuff, and still doing that. So those missions were, those kind of missions were still going on throughout the whole 90s, the early 90s, Bosnia and all those kind of things started coming into play. Mogadishu and Somalia, Battle of Mogadishu happens, and all those kind of things. That's another one where we were the squadron on that rotation to get that mission. And then it just drags on so long in the prep that we come out of that mission cycle and it just transfers over to other squadrons. But all these things, man, like I was saying, there's so much stuff going on. There was so much stuff going on there, just like it is now.
Mm-hmm.
We just don't hear about it. And it's like or what was that? In the SF team that got shot up in, I want to say it was Nairobi or something. But
Nairobi. Yeah, you're talking about the cam footage that like popped out of them getting the ambush.
Yeah,
exactly. And that was like a lot of people are like, we have SEALs there, like what? Like they were like, what's happening? Yeah, it's exactly what I'm talking about, because it's people see shit like that and then they're like, what? Who? Like who's even there? Why are we there? And then people start having the conversation.
What are we doing in Africa?
Yeah.
So been there the whole time.
Yeah, we got people everywhere. Like
so there's so many things that are left undone. Back to the whole right left thing and committing troops. So the mess that was made in Libya in 2011 during the Obama administration, Biden, Clinton was the sec state. Pretty much motivated them to overthrow Gaddafi, right? Mm-hmm. Pretty much just said, hey, yeah, absolutely, protest. If you're not happy with your government, protest. All the things they said about even us. Libya, Yemen, same thing. So embassies. So I have a list that I have kept track of, just so I don't. I have as much. I'm forcing myself to be unbiased, right? So I know what I believe. I know what I think. But I've been tracking all that stuff from a long time ago. Like my indication of things going south and geopolitics and who's making better decisions. Who am I going to trust better, even in the agency or my time in the unit? And my litmus test is, how are the embassies doing? What are their threat levels? Excuse me. What are their threat levels, and are they still there?
Mm-hmm.
So Libya, since 2011 overthrow of Gaddafi, no. That office is in Tunis, still managing Libya, but they're in Tunis. Yemen, same thing. We took off in 2015, never went back. So what's the status of that country and that embassy? It's not there anymore. And they're in Africa managing Yemen operations. Man, where else? The Charge d'Affaires that was in Mogadishu that asked for the help in 93, nobody's there anymore. Mm-hmm. It's like, so what do we do with Somalia? And who was in charge at the time?
Yep.
Those are all my indicators. Benghazi, same thing, right? Where's the state? So what difference does it make to us, right? What does it matter? A lot of Americans, it doesn't. It's like, but when you're talking about voting for the best person for the job, if you're not aware of what they're doing outside the United States, which most of them are very well aware that nobody gives a shit about what happens outside the United States, so they focus your attention interior of the borders, and so you don't pay attention to this thing out here. And I've always paid attention because I'm directly impacted by it, and so too is my family. So they've always wanted to know what's going on. So I've always told them, it's like, just pay attention to like the embassies. It's a website. You go to their website. Just go U.S. Embassy Libya, U.S. Embassy anywhere in the world, U.S. Embassy Congo.
Yeah.
what are they saying is happening over there? So, and plus we have, if it's not military, we have diplomats. We have Americans over there. That's important, right? And so in my hostage counterterrorism, days, that was important to keep track of for those reasons. Like, what's the status of these embassies and where might I go next, right? So I've been tracking it in those terms. Now I track it just to maintain some sort of as biased as I can opinions about who's doing the right things, like current day Biden, Harris, and Blinken. That's next state, right? What are they doing? Not a whole lot. There's a long list of embassies since in their time frame that have had to close, evacuate, and all these things, right? And so what are you doing, right?
Well, it's also, you got, again, like we'll get here in a sec too, but, a lot of the GRS guys, you guys are involved directly or in a lot of these situations as well. And it's like, the global chess they might want to play. It's like you guys are directly getting impacted by this, and you can see that situation boiling 100 miles away, and they're ignorant to it until you get a situation like Benghazi or something that just boils over, and then they're like, "Oh, how did this happen?" You're like, "No shit, this happened. We've been telling you for months this was going to happen." So jumping into that, I guess wrapping up, your time with Delta, when did it feel right to start stepping away from the unit?
Well, it got to, so it just got we were so busy, right? So, and then it got to the point where at one point I was like, well, I've done everything that I wanted to do at one point. So it's not like, okay, I'm done, I'm ready to leave. But it was like, well, I was trying to get some semblance of life. I remembered that I had one. And I was like, well, and the gal I was dating at the time was like, I need to focus my energy like I am here. Because you really do. You have to really commit yourself to being that in the unit and being that good at what you do. It's a lot of commitment. And then I was like, well, I need to apply this elsewhere, because what's the worst going to happen? We're going to get deployed somewhere. It's like, it gets to the point where it's like, okay, what do you want me to do? Kill or capture? What do you want me to do?
Just put it on the desk.
It's like, then it becomes like routine, right?
Yeah.
It's like, so it's not a good place to be in your head when you're in a unit like that. So I honest assessment with myself was like, well, that's not safe for me to think that way for myself or my teammates. So, and as much as they take care of you too. If you just want to take a break, they'll find a place for you to take a break. You don't have to leave. Just, okay, take a break. I understand it's busy and it's taxing and all this stuff, other stuff. We'll give you a break. And at the time I was like, well, I'm already at a time where I can retire. So if I take a break and come back, I'm already at that time. It's like, it's time to move on.
Yeah, I'll be back. I'll be out in a few anyway.
Yeah. So that was it. It was the, what I guess at the time it was the hardest decision to make. Yeah, because it's just so purposeful, right? And the guys that are there are awesome, and working with those dudes. Yeah, everybody with it. So, and I've never seen that again ever. A place with everybody, even the support folks. They just are good at their job and they love what they're doing. They don't have to be dart kickers. Whatever they're doing there, they just love it and they're good at it. And to be that supported to do a single mission for, that's huge. But that's what it takes, right? And so anywhere else I've ever been, you're never going to find that again. It's like that many people with that much focus and like importance on the mission, or on the single mission. Everybody's just focused on that, support it, direct action stuff, whatever it is. Everybody's all in. And yeah, it's just the best place to work. It's hard to, because I know for a fact I don't know where else that exists.
Just about to ask a question about that, because I did see Andrew Bustamante was a CIA case officer and everything. And he was comparing Delta Force, CIA Paramilitary, and DevGru. And he was speaking extremely high of Delta. I'd be interested, I mean, for what you're highlighting here, and then maybe some of the other nuances as well. Like, what do you think separates the three between those three kind of groups? And again, a lot of times, a lot of people will say Delta is that unit. Like, they're the top of the top.
Yeah. It's a lot of things. So I think it's a common value and of just being a professional. Like, that's what I said to myself. I'm a professional soldier. So what does that mean? And so it means exactly what they ask you to do. To do the best you can. Whatever it is, do the best you can. Right? There's no way to define it, right? So I've heard, again, I've never played professional sports, but when people get to the pros from college, they're like, oh my God, that's like everything goes faster. Like, you have less reaction time to, on a defensive side of the ball, to react to stuff, because the offensive line, their expectation of holding the line is a lot less because the defense is that much better, right? Quarterbacks have less time to do stuff now. They can't do like long plays that take time because everybody's too good for that. Everybody's moving faster. Everybody's bigger. Everybody's heavier. Everybody's better. And that's what happened to when I got the unit too. It's like everybody thinks they're at this level because you've also passed selection. You've also passed OTC and now you're there. So it's like, okay. And then it's like, oh my God. It's like, everything's so much better, so much faster, and now I have to perform even more and better. And again, I don't know the magic to the selection and the all process. I know what I went through in the physical aspect of the selection process, of the tests that I had to take, and they were all inclusive tests, like intellect. It's physical too, but it's also mental acuity, intellect. I'm guessing, reasoning, all that stuff has to be all like maxed out.
Yeah.
And these are all tests that you can't study for. It's just who you are. So, and that's why they say what they say. Just do the best you can.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what is that?
Yeah.
What does that mean to you and me? It's different. But everybody ends up with with just a drive to do the best that you can, whatever it is, which you will not see that, because a lot of places like the agency, it's very individual, very independently. Like, you're based off of what your individual performance is. It's not teamwork. It's individual performance. If you're on a team, okay, your team's going to be evaluated too for their teamwork, but you're still rated and assessed based off of your individual achievements. So what happens when you have that environment? It's like, okay, well, ultimately, my bottom line is my success, not yours. So that breaks up team cohesiveness and all that kind of stuff. So it doesn't always work that way. Depends on the paramilitary side of the agency too. There's that. So guess what most of those guys are? Former unit guys.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know that tends to be the pipeline.
So, it's professionalism, I guess, is bottom line is, and it's also instead, even at the agency. Okay, I could have made, I don't know, I could have done probably better, I guess, if I was just concerned about myself. But internally, I am who I am, so I'm looking after folks, right? Looking after my team and all those kind of things. So if I get promoted, okay, I'm not doing something to get promoted. Mm-hmm. I'm just doing the job the best that can be done. And I'm getting the guys that I have on a team at the time to do the best they can. So my concepts and my mentality is the same.
Unit guy.
But it's not, yeah, but it's not going to work. It's not going to work in the agency because, and I was told that you get counseled, like performance counseling in the agency from your supervisors, if they're decent supervisors, which is another thing. But they tell you, hey, you do your job well, you lead your teams and all that stuff. But if we have expectations of you to take like another position, like whatever the next positions are, management level positions and all that stuff. It's like, but you got to step away from doing that, being so focused on this with the guys. Now you got to focus on yourself and do this for your advancement. And I was never there for that. It's like, well, I don't care about that.
Yeah.
I'm promoted to whatever I'm promoted at, but the job is what I think is very important. And it's probably one of the most rewarding, prestigious jobs to have, right? For protection, and especially in that environment, because you're doing more with less. And so it's a respect for the position and the job that you have, right? You're responsible for somebody else's life. Mm-hmm. I used to tell the guys that I was in charge of in the field, it's like, that's pretty important.
Yeah.
I was like, so, you don't be here because it's a status thing. If you're here for a status thing, I'll find out because it's going to show in your performance. Mm-hmm. And so that was my thing too. It's like, I'm holding you to those standards, not, don't just pass the test to be here. You got to keep performing. And you're here to protect somebody else's life. So if you're not here for that, I'm going to send you home. And I sent guys home. And when I first said that and then did it, because a lot of guys talk smack and then they don't, act on their words. I was like, so I'm that guy.
I am that dude. Yeah. I will send your ass home.
Do your job the way I see you need to do it. Those are the standards. And they're really, again, there's a lot of things you can say in a training environment. Like these are the standards. You do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and you passed. Okay, that's fine to get you passed through this test, and you pass the test. Now real life is going to slap you in the face, and now your lack of performance means somebody gets hurt or potentially dies because you did or did not do something. Mm-hmm. So I always took it to that level on, this is probably the most important thing you'll do in your life is protect somebody else and in a bad situation. We're going to put you in a bad situation. We know it's bad, and it's in a bad overall environment. There's nothing working to your advantage in here, but that's why we're here. And that's like the embassy's thing too. I used to tell my sister that too. It's like, well, I can't always tell you where I'm going, and I can't always tell you what's happening, but we don't go to places that are nice. We go to places that are shit, and it's a bad situation. That's all I'm saying. So, and I'll let you know later on when I get back, if I get, I'm not saying if I get back, I'm saying I'll let you know at one point where I was. And, so that's, talking to my sister over the years too. It's like, and all the time in the unit, my dad didn't even know I was there. And so he wouldn't worry. And, that was a funny thing when that happened, but I told him eventually where I was, like a year and a half before I retired out of the military. And I said, well, I probably shouldn't do that again. If I do something like that again, which I didn't think I was, I should probably let him know up front. So then when I get to the agency, I was like, oh, shit. I should probably tell my dad what I'm doing. I'm a grown man. He's not going to punish me. It's like, so I finally get there, and I was like, well, so my uncle kind of had an idea where I was working. And so within the first year and a half, or something like that, he's like, he goes to my uncle goes to the Marine Corps birthday celebration in DC, and I'm in DC, and I said, oh yeah, he comes to visit me, and he said, I'm going to be in town for the Marine Corps ball. And also I was like, oh, cool. We'll do dinner and all that stuff. We did it. And I met him at a restaurant in Arlington, and met him after work. And I was right down the street, CIA headquarters. And he's like, I go meet him for dinner. We sit down and we're having. He's like, "So where are you at?" And for legitimately, I was contracting for the State Department. So there were before that. So that particular office was in Arlington, and so I was like pointing out, it's like, so I'm working that building right there. And it was the old State Department High Threat Protection Office, right? Which I didn't work at anymore. And he's like, so, and then there's a bunch of State Department buildings there, and then there's Main State in DC. And I said, well, to kind of pseudo disclose to him where I was like, no, I'm right down the street, down Georgetown Pike. And he's like, okay, what's there? He's like, wait a minute, what? The only thing that direction, you go to DC this way and Alexandria and everything that way. If you take a left, he's like, you need to tell your dad what you're doing. I was like, so my uncle, grown men, were scolding me like, you need to tell your dad where you're at. I was like, I know.
I know exactly what you're saying in DC too. That's a perfect way to put it together. You're like, oh wait, don't look in that direction. Oh my God, this motherfucker's with the CIA.
Yeah. And so his thing was like, I knew it. It's like
jumping with that then. I mean, you spoke to I guess before getting into your progression there, can you speak a little bit with Triple Canopy and just kind of what you were working with the State Department there, like the contracting years?
Oh yeah, that was good stuff. That was interesting too. So I got out of the military at the unit doing that. And really, so when I said it to myself then, I said, how I refer to it is like, I'm going to go straight. Mm-hmm. No more running and gunning, no more, stuff. I don't even want guns. I got rid of the guns that I had, even my personally owned stuff when I retired. It's like, yep, no, it's not going to be me anymore. Right. And I'm going to school. I'm going to be a student. I'm going to get my degree and all this other stuff. I'm going to be a regular person. It didn't work out so well, but I go to college and get that experience, and it just wasn't it wasn't my thing. And but I'm trying and working and going to school and all this other stuff. And 9/11 happens, and now it's like, so even initially then it was like, well, there's what is going to happen. Nobody knew. Mm-hmm. And eventually we're getting into this 20-year war. But back then, nobody knew what was going to happen. And so I said, well, I committed myself to school and being a regular person and, doing all that kind of crap. And then it was just, it's just, oh my God, it was eating me up. It's like I wanted to do something. I just felt I needed to do something. Was it going back to the unit? Was it, what was, I don't know. I wasn't really thinking about what I could do. It's like, so if I was in the unit and I saw a guy coming back, would I even be on a team? Would I, be accepted on a team or stuff like that? And, or in what capacity can I help, the system? So I go to I've only been to a couple of unit functions. They have a formal and an informal get together every year. And I've only ever been to a couple of them. And that was like, I think the second one that I've ever been to. And I went to that one in 2003 and run into a bunch of guys. And I'm back in Bragg, back at the unit, back inside the building. And I was like, oh my God, this is it, right? This is it. Loved being back there, talking to folks again, just reunion stuff. Have even older guys there, some plank owners, initial guys, they're still alive and kicking, and they're telling their stories, and I'm, talking to them. It's just amazing. And I now know what's going on. I'm they're giving us briefings on what the unit's doing these days, and they're, running a gun in Afghanistan, and Iraq's, just kicked off, and a lot of good stuff. And also who's there's other guys, former unit guys that are there at this meeting, just like me. But they have this idea since this new global war on terror is not stopping and it's going to continue gaining steam, they're going to start this company. And I heard that spiel at this time. So this is 2003. So at that time, there's a lot of things that I'm hearing, contracts, Blackwater, and State Department. DynCorp's always had like contracts like that, right? And that was a place I actually was going to go to. And former unit guys, before the global war on terror, DynCorp always had like a protection aspect of their company. So that was something I was even thinking about. So that's all I knew about the whole contracting world. And the two guys that were talking at this unit function, they were like, "Hey, we're thinking about spinning up this company." And my thing was, well, that was great for me because the other Blackwaters and stuff like that were spinning up. I didn't know it. I didn't hear any familiar names. So I was like, well, I don't know who that is. I don't know who they are. They're apparently qualified, super qualified, formers of some, Marines, Navy, and all this stuff. I was like, yeah, okay. I don't hear any familiar names. So I don't want to put myself in that position. And the guys at the unit, they were talking about it. I was like, oh, well, yeah, it's going to be unit guys. Absolutely. If it gets going to where you need some guys, yeah, give me a call. This is my number and all that stuff. And no sooner than I get back home, they're like, "Yep, we're spinning up," and it's Christmas time, right? 2003. It's right before Christmas, and we need guys to go like now to Iraq and to start the company. We'll go to Chicago for a little bit. It was in Lincolnshire where it started. We'll go to Chicago, start the company. That's where everybody's at now. We'll get everything together. We'll get the finances together and all this other stuff. We'll start working on kit to send overseas and all of this stuff. And then we'll go over and be the first teams on the ground for Triple Canopy. There's already people there, but we'll be the first ones for Triple Canopy. Okay, let's do this. And it was just, so I was like so into it. I was like, God dang. I didn't ask my girlfriend at the time. I didn't ask her, say, "Hey, I heard about this company spinning up. I'm going to spend some time in Iraq," And I didn't say anything. I was like, "I'm going to go to Chicago for a minute, a couple of weeks, and then we're going to go to Jordan, I think it was, and then and also what I thought could have been a thing was we're going to set up from Lincolnshire, go to Jordan, and then set up there, and then eventually get into Iraq. And then just stage there and logistically set up things. So I thought it was going to be a little bit longer, personally, to make things to get myself into Iraq.
Yeah, get active.
But I was like, wham, 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 and I don't even remember when I first got on the ground, but it happened so fast. And it was like, pack your bags. Before you know it, I'm in Jordan, waiting for a flight into Baghdad, Iraq. And so the flight doesn't come. We have all this gear that's arriving, and we're waiting for flights. We can't get flights because now the Iraq's kicking off, right? Yeah. And so we can't get a military flight in, so we drive in. So we hired taxis from Baghdad to come out to pick us up at the border of Iraq. And we took taxis to the border. And it was like, oh my God, this is contracting.
Yeah, I'll take a tax.
So we don't have any like true intel. The intel that we get is from the news and whatever we could find out from people that we know are there in Baghdad. And there are some guys in Baghdad still, or already from Triple Canopy, just a couple. We're talking to them about, what's going on. Where are we going to? Where are we going to be housed and all this other stuff? And so we're driving down Highway 1 the whole time, right through Fallujah and Ramadi and the worst of the worst.
Yeah.
And it was just, oh my God, it was interesting to say the least. So we're also getting guns when we get across the border. We can't have guns yet. So that's some of the things we're waiting on to happen. Like we don't have any guns that have arrived.
So this
in
trip's
Baghdad.
unarmed.
No, well,
or like relative, like
we have to get to the Iraqi border, and then once we cross the border, we're going to get guns. Yeah. So the team that was on the Iraq side had I don't know, half a dozen or so people who are bringing the taxis to the border to get us. So, and they also have the guns, the ammo, and all that stuff. So, get to the border, jump in the cabs, and they're Suburbans. They're black, white, and orange Suburbans. Pack all this stuff up, get some guns, and I don't know these things if they work or not. Okay, get a gun, a couple magazines, and let's go to Baghdad. Yeah, it's like, okay, well, we're here, let's do it. So I'm also thinking though, still that there's some sort of bigger support apparatus for us, like I was used to in the military, right? Like who are we going to call? Like surely somebody's got a phone number or radio frequency or call sign to call if we get in trouble. So, but I don't know that. It's like, no, we're going to call our guys in Baghdad, and hopefully they can make something happen, right? And that's how it ends up to be. But I'm thinking, okay, well, it'll work out.
Yeah,
right?
we'll make this work.
So thank God it just did. But along the way, our drivers decide at one point they're going to quit. And this is like the Highway 1 around probably the Ramadi area. And they just pulled over, just randomly pulled over and had like a sit-in strike kind of thing going on. It's like, no, they're hearing from whoever it is they're talking to that it's too dangerous to go into Baghdad.
Yeah, we fucking hired you for that.
Yeah. We're out in the middle of the desert, Highway 1. It's like, so they're fine. They're just going to sit, squat, and just like, we're going to be here until whenever. It's like, no. So the dudes in Ramadi are like right there. There's another group of bad guys there. And then Fallujah, there's those dudes. And this is the road they use too. There's only one road.
Yeah.
It's like, well, we can't stay here. And all of the Americans that were with me, they were like, we got to try and convince these guys that they got to get us to Baghdad. Just get us to Baghdad. We'll pay you more money, whatever it is. And they weren't taking money. They're like, no, they absolutely refuse. Like, you can't pay me enough to go to Baghdad tonight. It's like, what? So eventually we convinced them that this is the right thing to do to get us there. Then we'll pay you this much money and we're fine. You can be done with us. And they eventually get us there, but we get there late at night. And I don't know Baghdad yet. So the guys that drove out to get us are the ones driving back in. They're the only ones that know Baghdad. The streets, the environment. Yeah. So, and we're coming in just like we own the place, driving through Baghdad to get to the green zone, to get to where we're supposed to stay. And I have no idea. So it's not like, we all have GPS systems and we all have a plan route on it and maps out and like a tactical move or nothing. We don't have any of that stuff. And I'm just literally going wherever this driver takes us. And so with this convoy, I don't know, there's a huge convoy. It had to be at least 10 vehicles, all orange and white Suburbans, just driving through Baghdad, and sun's starting to go down, and it's starting to get dark when we get there eventually. And I had no idea where we were at the whole time. It was like, okay, I know I'm in Iraq. I know I'm in Baghdad, or I know I was near Ramadi and Fallujah and all those main cities on the way there. But if something happened and I had to say where I was, I would not have known exactly where I was. And we finally get to the green zone, and there's these at the checkpoint we go through. There's American tanks and all the stuff. The first real like, holy shit, we're in Baghdad. Here we go They dropped us off. We get all our stuff out. The cabbies, were gone as soon as they were emptied. Gave them some money and never saw them again. But yeah, that was an experience. And it's like, I'm asking the questions now. It's like, well, surely you guys had somebody here watching, like waiting to react and respond to us, like a QRF or something somewhere. And they're like, yeah, no.
Yeah. You guys are on your own.
The Army's doing Army stuff. Yeah, they're on their own. They're doing their own thing. They're busy. But yeah, that was the intro to contracting. And then my understanding at the time that, unless there's military will help you, another American, if they're not doing something for the Army or another military unit. So that's where I started getting all those things. Then it was just a matter of running around Iraq. So as contracts are starting to get formed and sites are getting developed, we're going to those sites to protect the Americans that are there. So it was the CPA at the time. So not quite embassy, but they're it's like an embassy or kind of the embassy mice. They're the representatives of the United States. And so it's not consulate stuff, but the Coalition Provisional Authority is who they are. That's what their official name is. But they're Americans, French, or whoever, right? So that's how we started getting contracts for the CPA. And then going to the bases that were starting to form bases. Ramadi was one of them. Tikrit, Mosul up north, Suleimania, a bunch of Talil down south, in Baghdad itself. And it was just a matter of going to those sites, getting them prepped. They were usually on military bases or near military bases or with military, like a joint site of some sort. So it wasn't so bad. And some of them were pretty remote. Just whatever you had and the protectees.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so like for me, I eventually went up north and I was supposed to, there's 10th SF group was there, but they were doing their own thing. So, and they were on their own base. So I had to go up there to find, vet, train, and recruit like locals to do base defense, protection, and those kind of things. And I had a crew of Americans to do it for the Americans, but for the most part, it's like a State Department thing. So most people on a State Department protection detail overseas, it's locals that have been trained to provide protection.
Really?
Yeah, and you'll have a State Department agent that's in usually the limo, but everybody on the detail is a local national, and that's always been that way. So that's what we were doing. We were training protection teams, static security folks, training them weapons and all that stuff. Women, men. It's here, grab a duffel bag of money, go hire, train, and recruit, right? And get these guys, spun up to protect their people. And so that's what it worked out. It was pretty good. It's more traditional, like a special forces mission. But that's what we did.
Were you guys seeing a lot of engagements, or were
Oh
often,
yeah,
it was pretty commonplace with that?
That was like the Wild West back then. Yes, you couldn't go anywhere without getting shot at. Even in Baghdad. So the Army or they mapped out everything, gave everything names that they can remember or associate with. So, there's roads and sections, Budweiser and all kinds of American names they applied to all this stuff. So Route Irish was a route between Baghdad and Baghdad Airport. And that run was like a suicide run every time you jumped on that road. But you had to. It was like the only road you could take to the airport. So, and everybody used to get hit on that road. If you were on it, you were going to expect to get hit. Army was on it. They got smacked around on that. Everybody that was on that road got smacked around on that thing. So that was like you kind of couldn't avoid it, right?
Mhm.
So as a contract company, we didn't have helicopters and stuff we could fly to the airport. We have to drive. So it was one of those things like, well, put on your vest and get your eye pro and your ear pro in and get your mouthpiece in and get ready to get in it because we had to go to the airport. It was mostly logistical, picking up people. So that they used to use that a lot still, or then the airport was actually functioning. So we'd have to have, we got to go get another group of people.
Yeah, like we'll see what happens this time.
Yeah, let's do this, right? Hopefully it works out again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when did CIA and like the opportunity of GRS start kind of crossing your radar?
So as a contractor, I was going back and forth, and then I was always keeping track of leads on job opportunities and stuff like that. So the Dying Corps and the Blackwaters and all that stuff, everybody's starting up security companies and doing things. When I got back to the States, every time I'd go through all the messages that were left on, hey, we might have something that you might be interested in, kind of job inquiries and recruiters and all that stuff. And so I'd go through those every time I got back. Some of them are okay and legit, and some were like, I didn't feel like doing that. It's not for me kind of stuff. And this one for the agency, that was one like many. They just said, hey, we have a job that you are well suited for. If you're interested, give us a call at this number. And it was like that, and like many other calls that I was responding to, and call them, set them up, talk to them, set up an appointment for an interview. And they're not saying a whole lot.
You knew it was an agency role at this point, or no? No. Okay. Yeah. So.
Yeah. And so at the same time I'm doing that, though, I'm trying to apply through their recruiter, was a former unit guy at the time, to go to Ground Branch. So he had said at one point, now he's deploying too. So he's also a recruiter for the Ground Branch at the time, on the contracting side. And we can't sync up our schedules. I'm either deployed, he's deployed. Every time I come back, he's like, hey, I got to take off tomorrow. I got another interview in the morning, but then I got to jump on a plane. It's like, okay. So he tells me at one point, he's like, well, I'll tell you what. He goes, go to the website, go to the agency website, go to this job description, apply for it, and we'll flag it for HR to grab when they see your name. And I was like, okay. So I go to the website, apply for this job. And that's even how GRS got my information.
They saw your pipeline.
Yeah. So I'm assuming what it is.
It's probably ground. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought that was the ground side of things. And so I go to this interview, and, as they're talking about things, it was weird. So they're talking to me like, I know what I signed up for. And I'm talking to them like, what I signed up for. And we're going through this interview thing. And I was like, wait a minute. What do you guys do? What do you guys? It's like the whole Bob question. What did it say? What do you?
Could you maybe explain quick for viewers that might not understand the context here? Because this is hilarious. The fact, like the separation of the two. Like, what is the difference between GRS and Ground Branch, and like, I guess what operations they might be doing? Because the deliberation that would be there is very.
Yeah. So Ground Branch is part of another directorate that's more of a paramilitary. They are structured paramilitary. So that's the operations they do. It's more along the lines of like a special forces mission, like train, equip, and foreign militaries and stuff like that. So direct action stuff. They're doing all that kind of stuff. GRS is on the protection side. So we're on a smaller teams, and we're on a clandestine kind of protection role for intel gatherers that are in the war zones. And it's like I was saying before, we don't go to places that are running well. Yeah. It's already gone to shit. And so now they need us. So the protection side of that thing too is like, so they can do their job and not focus on their own safety. That's what we did. We provided the safety and their security so they can do the intel collecting. So as I'm trying,
I'm doing this interview.
All the guys that I know in the agency are either case officers, they're intel collectors, or they're in ground branch. And that, because that was kind of the natural course of things, right?
Yeah.
And so I submitted my resume for HR to grab it in that regard, and I get the call. It's like, it's kind of one of those things like, hey, you applied for a job and we want to interview, right? You know what you applied for, right? It's that job, right? And I'm doing the same thing. It's like, oh, yeah, I got you, right? And I get there, and it's not what I thought at all. And I said, wow, I finally get, what do you, wait, what?
Who the hell are you?
Who are you? What section are you guys? And because I don't know how to speak like directorate and stuff like that. I don't know how they're broke down like that. Like, so, what section are you guys in? It's like, so we are the Directorate of Support, Office of Security, Global Response Staff, all this other stuff. This is our mission. And I was like, I totally thought I was here for another reason, right? but that, I didn't know you guys had this, right? So that sounds interesting. So yes, this is up. And so I eventually end up going that route. And it was a good job. It was so at 2003, it wasn't at its infancy, but it was fairly new. And then now it just getting huge. So Iraq comes into play, and now we're starting to expand in GRS, and they need more guys and all this other stuff. So I was going to do that with the intent. I never, again, it's like the military too. I was like, I'll do this for a couple of years. Yeah. Whatever. We'll ride this train for a little while and see where it goes. And so I did that. Now I did know the NSA has another similar kind of a group like GRS. And I actually did do some contracting. In my contracting, I'm bouncing back and forth. I got a buddy who's working on that side of the house, and he's like, hey, man, are you available during this time frame? And I was like, yeah, I'm not deployed. I'm doing DynCorp stuff or triple Canopy stuff. Yeah, I'll go do, I'm supposed to go to Afghanistan. They were just spinning up a team in Afghanistan. I ended up going to Baghdad to replace those guys so they can go to Bagram and spin up the NSA protection detail for those guys. So I knew they had something going like that. And I probably even crossed paths with GRS dudes that I didn't know that's what they were.
Yeah,
I thought they were contractors of some sort or something like that. And I ended up, when I go to GRS, find out what they're doing. I was like, yeah, this is kind of cool. I'll do this, for a couple of years, see what happens. And then it just got to end my whole thing about, if this is what I'm supposed to be required to do, I don't think this training to get to this point, to my deployment, is beneficial. So to me, or if it's somebody who doesn't have experience at all, it's not giving them any like real preparation to go do this job. That's
kind of what I was going to ask next. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was that guy to push back. And most of the management at the time was like, well, this is what we've been doing. This is what the guys that have been here from the start have input to get what we have right now. Now, and I was very honest with them. I was like, nah, this
sucks.
This is like JV stuff. It's like, I assumed you guys were like, wanted to be like the varsity guys. So this is not what I expected. And if this is what it is, then, I might not stick around very much longer and just keep pursuing other things. And that part of the agency doesn't take well to like feedback like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But, hey, that's fine. And then I'm not going to work here then. I don't care. It's not like you have to fire me because I'll just go.
Yeah. Yeah.
if this is what it is.
And once contracts wrapped,
I thought it was something else. All right, my bad. That's really what motivated me, even to stay the 16 years that I did, is to kind of affect positive change. Positive change would have been not just because it was what I want, my thing. It wasn't just my thing. It was like better for the
security
group.
of people.
Yeah, better for the group to do certain things a different way.
Can you speak to those training, like to the level you obviously can, but like what was when you came in that made you feel that way in terms of the way that they were training and operating, and what changes did you want to see being made essentially?
Yeah. So in my class, I can't remember what we called it. In my class, so you get taught like basic protection stuff. So motorcades, full stuff. You get taught that. And then at one point, and you're getting taught with protective agents who are actually working for the directors, protective detail, and all that kind of stuff. So it is more traditional protection. You have a lead car, you have a limo, you have advances and everything associated with a traditional kind of protection detail. GRS is totally different. So the guys that were going through with me, some of the guys who had no previous experience were getting the same training, and they're asking questions and they're actually saying, it's like, well, you get it and you're doing good at this stuff, but you have more of a base knowledge that I do, and I'm not tracking on this stuff. And so there's extra training involved that I spent with some of the guys, and good for them to realize that if this is what we're getting ready to do, this isn't enough. Right. And I was like, yeah, I know. So, and we're getting ready to, as soon as we're done with this in a couple of weeks, we're getting ready to, ship out to Iraq to do it, to lead teams to go do it. And so that was my whole thing. I was like, so we have some guys that are, if this is what you say preparation is to do this job, it's not. If you get a guy who doesn't have no experience from 0 to, he's only going to get to 10 miles an hour. That's it. It's like, you're going to want him to go 100, but he's only going to go 10. Mm-hmm. And because he doesn't have all this other experience. So I think somebody else, that's been mentioned quite a few times. Why don't so this is for the staff side, full-time CIA positions. So it's been asked, why isn't the standards the same to get in to the program, the same as the contractors to get in? Because they have to have all this war zone experience, SEAL, special operations experience, MARSOC, or all this other previous experience will get you to the start point. But for staff, no. I had all the experience, but that was just happened to be what I had at the time. And it never was. So they're still ate up on their training mindset and their methodology on what they think is training and training for that job. It's progressed to a lot more than what it was, and they really revamped the program quite a bit. But the agency as a whole gets so ate up on criteria for passing a certain thing. Mm-hmm. And they just so their staffers, staff CIA officers who are coming up with grading criteria for a particular task. The name of task is just ridiculous. It's you got to pass these 10 subtasks to pass the overall thing. It's so okay, not really. So why? So as an experienced guy too, I got counseled once. I was a security violation going through the house doing CQB stuff. I was like, what? It's like, what? You flagged your partner. I was like, no, I didn't. It's like, yeah, we saw it. We were on the catwalk. At this time when this happened, you flagged your partner. I was like, no, I didn't. If I did, I'll tell you. I'm not going to lie to you. Yeah. And I know where my muzzle is.
I was going to say a Delta guy, no shot.
Yeah. and I was like, I argued with him. I signed it. I was like, dude. He's like, no, we're going to have you sign paperwork saying you were a security violation. This is what you did. I was like, dude, I am going to sign this, but I'm also going to write on here, I disagree with your assessment of what my performance was. And I don't care who you are, because he's like in charge of training, right? So he's got some clout. They put him in that position for a reason, I guess. Come to find out, it wasn't all that.
Yeah.
And and that was like most of the thing in there. And I get these counseling. If you get 3 counseling statements, if you're a secure violation, you can't proceed to the next level. I was like, okay.
Yeah, you're like, man,
Then I guess I'll go find something else.
came here for Ground Branch originally. I don't even know what's going on.
I didn't want to be here to begin with.
Yeah.
And then, so that becomes a thing for me, though. It's like, well, it's not that I was being stubborn, because I could have left. I could have said, okay, whatever. But they say it in a way that's like, they said it in a way that was almost like coercive, or like if you mess up one more time, you're not going to make it. It's like, okay. And I was still talking to everybody, and they finally, apparently they have a discussion back at headquarters about me and a few other students that probably aren't going to pass on to the next phase, which is just driving and some other fun shit. And because we're safety violations, so we're not getting it. And the chief at the time, he's part of that conversation. He comes out, talks to everybody, like almost like, the cadre we have out here, their word is God. So whatever they say, I'm going to go with it. And you're a new guy, so they have more weight than you. I don't care where you came from. It doesn't matter what experience you have. These guys are the decision makers. And the whole time I was like, okay, sure. Yeah. You guys are running this thing. Sure.
So crazy.
I'm going to, and it's not like, so they reinforce the cooperate to graduate thing, right? They don't care about your performance. They just want you to do what you were told to do, the way they told you to do it. And with no flexibility on like, just being aware that, all right, so this is what the end state was supposed to be. We still got there. You just got there a little bit differently, but we're still there. So instead of having that kind of a mindset, like a methodology on their training and their perspective on training, it was like, no, you got to the same spot, but you screwed up because you didn't do these 3 steps.
How I want it done. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, okay. Yeah, that was a horrible experience.
Was it surprising, like coming into, not probably having some knowledge with Ground Branch and everything you'd been able to speak in previously, but was it just so surprising to see that the CIA, which is obviously, a lot of covert units, a lot of really important operations going down, have such a shitty fucking training pipeline like that?
Yes, very surprising. And that was my thing too about, I know it's different in other areas. And why are you guys that way, right?
Mm-hmm. Is the relationship that GRS guys have with the case officers.
Yeah.
The way he highlighted it, which is pretty funny. He's like, you go and you look, you're a unit guy. He was a Navy SEAL. You might have a Ranger, whatever. You got some very highly trained operators. And then you might have a kid that just came out of Georgetown and did, went to the farm, did a couple of years, and all of a sudden he's trying to call the shots over there. Just curious to maybe hear your view on that, like the relationship you guys could have with case officers, and I guess how frustrating that might be in the GRS.
Yeah, some get it, some don't, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, the COs go through a lot of training, right? So, and it's sometimes a lot more than they've ever done as far as the paramilitary side. Most of it's, learning to run cases, collect intel, and the process of that, right? So that's fine, but they also learn some of the hard skills, shooting and running and driving, security driving, all that stuff. But which is probably, I did too, past a certain thing, and I thought I was the shit. I was like, until I found out, okay, it wasn't, there's more to it than this. So I get it from that perspective, but yeah, there's some that are, there's a lot of, even between schools. So even between types of schools you went to, if you were college educated, right? Mm. If you were Ivy Leaguer or a regular. So there's still that going on. And then there's did you go to college or not? Or were you military knucklehead, knuckle dragger kind of guy? And now what do you know about other than dragging your knuckles on the ground, right? So there is a lot of that. Some of the good ones, though, are, and there are good ones. There's probably more good ones than not, put you that way, because I've worked with a lot of people in a lot of different environments. So a lot of our GRS contractors were only in like the big war zones. So I've worked with other case officers in other areas, in other parts of the country that wasn't a war zone, it's just a high threat area, which different mentality. So that's where you get the different kind of the different environments, right? From a traditional embassy environment, high threat embassy, and a war zone. And some of our guys would have probably never functioned well in a regular embassy environment, still providing the same kind of protection. Put on a sport coat, suit and tie kind of thing. And which is fun. I saw that too. But you do have a lot of, I guess, you can call it animosity. That I don't need you to go out here. I can take care of myself, but I have to take you because my boss said so. It's like, okay, whatever.
Sure about that?
Yeah. And so there some of the techniques that I used to use when I was faced with that. It's like, okay, well, I don't have to go with you. I'm the team leader here, so I can say, if you don't need us, I can make that decision as the staffer to full-time staff CIA guy for GRS. I can make the decision. If you say you don't need us, we're not going to force ourselves on you. But based off of the threat and the intel that you are collecting, I'm making this decision that we either need to be with you, or maybe you can do without us. And I'll convey that to the big boss, the chief of the base, right? And we'll all decide collectively that you're okay doing it on your own. So I've had a lot of conversations like that. A lot of conversations like that don't happen. So that's where you get a lot of the, some of it's self-imposed animosity that you're not willing to work with them and have those kind of discussions, or calling out somebody like, okay, if you don't need us, great. We'll be here. If you need us, give us a call. And usually what happens is like, well, wait a minute. What if
I do need
What if this happens? Like, well, exactly. That's why we're here. So that I've seen that go back and forth. But so somebody has to be there to say those kind of things. A lot of our guys that were team leaders, so the staff officers for GRS are the team leaders for all these things, which, back to my experience on the training, the initial training, they're not all qualified really to the extent that our contractors are. They have a lot of previous experience in the military and other places. So it's some of that is self-imposed, and because we're not willing, those guys that are not willing to have those discussions with the management that's there, who are ultimately responsible for everybody's safety. That's how those kind of things, that's how most of those situations happen. But in some cases too, and we'll go to the Benghazi incident, where the animosity is at the top, at the chief of the base there. And we don't need you guys, kind of thing. We don't need you guys. And so I was asked, I wasn't there, I was in Baghdad when that happened, but when the book came out, our management staff at the time, they're going through the book to see, I'm not sure where it was in the draft, but they're trying to find out inaccuracies and stuff like that. And one of the questions I was asking me, because I was a supervisor at the time, like the attitude of the chief of base that is depicted in this book before the movie's made, is that really a thing? There's no way that there's people that act that way. I was like, yeah. And I was back in DC when they asked me that question. I was like, I guarantee you right now, one of our guys is having to deal with that right now, with the senior guy that's on his base right now. He is having that conversation right now. He's dealing with that right now. Guarantee it. And they're like, that was the first time that ever, because when they travel and go check on things, everything's fine.
Yeah, everyone's acting buddy.
Yeah,
We're all good.
Yeah, and so even a leader on a base that doesn't like the GRS will give them a hard time, and it's like, we don't need you guys here. You're only here because I'm being forced to house you here, kind of thing. That person, when they show up, oh yeah, you guys are awesome. They're the best thing ever. I'm glad they're here. Thank you for all the support they provide and all this other stuff. And then they leave, and then they're like, you guys, I hate you guys. It's like, so I told them, yeah, no, there's somebody out there right now, probably more than one, dealing with that right now. And then they said, well, have you ever done it? Had that experience? I was like, yeah, several times.
That's what I'm telling you right now.
Yeah. And so how is it that bad there? And we never heard about it before, including from your experiences. It's like, well, to me, that's part of the job. It's like dealing with that kind of stuff. And yes, I told everybody about it. I wrote things about it officially, the relationship. And for my successor who came and replaced me, I told him, the boss here doesn't want us here, but so you're going to have to deal with that. That's the environment you're in. They don't like us. They don't want us here. They think they can do without us, but they won't get rid of us. And here's the other thing. So if from the outside perspective, if a base is wanting to do something, or a place, could be a country, if they want to do something and it's coming from a funding source that GRS is attached to, then they'll say, why do you need this money for whatever? Well, so we have a GRS team, so that to them validates or verifies the level of threat that they're at, which they're using to get more money for the base to do other things, right? And so that was being used a lot in that regard. So somebody right now can hear that and say, nope, that's not what we did, and there's no way to prove that. I was like, okay, I don't care. I know that's what happened. I know how that happened, and I'm not going to dime anybody out, but yes, that's the way it was. We're not going to, and I used to say that too as a team leader. So I was in charge of both countries at one point, Iraq, all of GRS in Iraq and all of GRS in Afghanistan at one point, and other countries as well. So as a manager, I was like, well, if you don't need us, that's fine. We have definitely, I can put these guys to work in another country somewhere. That's fine. We'll go away, and if you need us again, give us a call. But and from my perspective as a manager of the entire group of folks that were either wherever it was, Iraq, Afghanistan, or wherever, I'm just managing my people, right? If you're not using them, if you're not, that's a wasted asset right there. Well, we're paying these guys pretty good money, and I can use them elsewhere. I know we're short in other places, so just let me know. I'll pull them out tomorrow, and we'll go somewhere else. And then they see their that source of funding and money to do other things disappear, and they're like, oh, I didn't really mean that. You don't have to do that, and all this other stuff. So I've gone to those conversations too. And and when I say symbiotic relationship, it can be that way, and it is that way in some places, and a lot of places it was, that everybody knows their place and everybody knows their capabilities. And GRS has always been a unique thing where there's the guys that comprised GRS had a lot of capabilities, and it could do a lot more than just, be a chauffeur, right? And that's actually what some of those that were, not our fans used to call us all the time. We're just a driver. It's like, all right, well then drive yourself then. If you could do the job and you can keep yourself safe, in certain environments too. When in Iraq and Afghanistan, when they were going though, you had to have permission from chief of station, the senior guy in the agency on the ground to make those decisions if somebody can drive by themselves. So it was an honest assessment on their capabilities, their training, their experience that they were making on his folks on the collector's side, whether they could do it or not. And then some places had little tests for the case officers to go, if you can do this test, if you know the streets, you got to know the streets, you got to do your AFAM, which is normal for them in their lives all over the world where we have people, intel collectors, right? They drive themselves to their meetings and do all this other stuff, right? But guess what they're also responsible to do is just like any other person that and us is they're going to have to go out and know the streets so they don't get lost. And so they know cut throughs and bypasses and everything else, right? And we did it because that's what our job was. So they got lazy. So over the years of relying on a GRS guy team to get them from point A to point B, they got lazy. So they stopped requesting or taking the time to learn the streets, to know, roadways and just simple little stuff like that. So I said that all the time. You guys getting lazy. Our collectors, right? You guys getting lazy. It's like, if you want to go out on an area familiarization, on an AFAM as an example. So if you want to go out on an AFAM, just let me know. We'll schedule it. And we have plenty of guys to get you out there on the street so you can drive the streets. And very rarely did that happen. So, but for the proactive folks that wanted to know their jobs and do their jobs better, so they would do that. They would come down to the team room. Hey, can I go out in the street with one of you guys, on a particular day? I'm not doing anything that day. I have 3 or 4 hours, whatever it is, to go on an AFAM. Absolutely. Every time that was a request, that would come down. So, but there's still a lot of that other stuff that was going on. Yeah, it was probably, it's a relationship too between us as leaders and having those conversations with the folks in the operations side of the house to have an honest assessment of we can do other things too, or sometimes not. It depends on who you got, right? Mm-hmm. And because there are guys who are capable. If it's to do everything other than just driving somebody to a meeting and back, there's other things we could be doing, sure. But we also have the thing too with our GRS guys who think they could do more than what they're being asked to, but probably shouldn't. Yeah. Yeah. Because they don't have that much experience. They've heard about it. They read about it. They know guys who've done it. So there's that.
Sounds cool.
Yeah. So from everywhere I went, I was like, yeah, no, not based off of, I'm going to assess our guys on our capabilities. And yes, we probably could do that. And, or not. There's a certain level. And I told the guys that too. It's like, hey, they want us to do this other thing. It may or may not be within our charter to do this. We don't know. Then we have contracting stuff too, like statement of works and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So it's having those kind of know what it is, know what your limits are, read the statement of work, and work with your station leadership and have those conversations. We can do all of this and that or not, whatever it is. And it depends on it. It really differed on country to country. So you got war zones and then you have other countries too, high threat areas.
I was actually kind of going to ask that in terms of like operating environments, what do you think would be your ideal is like a weird word to ask, but ideal. And then in terms of environments you have operated in, what do you think was the worst?
Well, close one. Close between northern Iraq and Libya were like the two most unstable places at those times I was there to be.
Yeah, we're going to Tripoli intersect too. Yeah. But yeah, I was just curious because it's like, I feel like That is such a key player too. Like, did you ever have pushback when you guys would be moving? Because Ben did tell a story about that in terms of like either the situation when you guys were going to meet an asset or something like that, or whatever it is, like with the situation now that got hot, or it was just a live engagement, whatever it might be.
Hmm?
Did you ever a situation where you faced pushback in terms of either moving out from, what the plan was for meeting with that asset or anything like that from the case officers? Were they usually very attentive in terms of like, hey, this is what we're doing. If shit hits the fan, I'm in charge. We're doing what we need to do. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah, I didn't. I heard about that though going on. Um, I know that happened. I personally didn't have that happen to me, and only because I didn't give him the ammunition to do that personally. I involved myself as much as I could, so it would never get to that point. But because I know that happened, and I've heard of that happening several occasions. But so that again, I put myself out there to run an interference like that in trying to make it an easier transition for other guys that I know that happened to. And how do I know that happened? Because they told me that happened. The actual case officers told me that it happened. I didn't trust him and all that stuff. So like, well, you could have trusted him just as easily as me or anybody else because he had his shit together.
mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of that too. There's a relationship, just bad conversations, communications, and then some of our GRS guys are a little hard headed, so I get it, but most of the good case officers were able to work with whoever they had because it was changing every 90 days. You get a whole new team in 90 days, and some of them even realized that and said, well, okay, for this 90 days I can do this, but as soon as the next group, I'm gonna not be able to do certain things. And then when they come back, this other group, I'll be back in the mix again.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of that stuff going on, but there is a lot of animosity and a lot of those attitudes. There was probably not as much of that as it didn't happen, but it did happen. And when it happens though, in those environments, it because of the operational environment, it amplifies the effect and the impact on people. I've heard of that. I know it happens. And as a country guy, and responsible for a country worth of GRS guys, I told the guys that were dealing with that, let me know, and I'll start here at the chief of station level. I'll have those conversations here, and then maybe have to fly out to your site and talk to your chief or talk with your chief. Not to say that, you need to do what we tell you to do, but you need to work with us kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So the times that I had those level conversations, it had to be done. So that's how I know it happened. I'd be told by any number of folks. Even the operational side of the house would call me and say, hey, we can't work with your guy down here. It's like, well, okay, I'll talk to him, see what's up, see what's going on, right? And it's probably not him.
It's probably not my guy.
Yeah. I get it. That's where you want to go, but I'll have a chat with him and see what's up.
Let's jump into the Tripoli evac. Is that situation, I mean, as we were just highlighting, there's very few areas in the world at that point in time that were, in terms of operating environment in that, in that region, some of the hottest areas. So I guess, where did that story start? When, what was the situation on the ground there?
Yeah, the situation. So we're talking 2014, late 2013 into 14, right? So about as close on the heels of the Benghazi September 12th, 2012 incident, right? So 2011, that whole overthrow goes down. 2012 is Benghazi. 2013 into 14 is when I get in the mix and start getting involved in it. And Tripoli is already a failed state, and people are running amok, and militias are fighting each other, and everybody's fighting for supremacy. in the new Libyan government, whatever that's supposed to look like. And so the U.S. policy, they're trying to hang on to what mess they made and try to make something. They don't. So in my opinion, so we tried to get this dude General Haftar to be somebody in their new government, right? And I think he just got so full of himself. He wanted to be the guy. He wanted to be the new king.
As it tends to be.
Yeah. And the U.S., we tried to make, Libya look like America. Two sides of the, Republican and Democrats. We had the GNC and the GNA that were supposed to be the new government. And somebody was supposed to be elected out of those two parties to be the new president. And then you have Haftar over here doing his thing, right? And then you have, the terrorist organizations doing what they're doing. Everybody, it's just a mess. Militias are trying to fight for supremacy in their areas and maintain their turf and get bigger.
Yeah, this is when ISIS is really starting to take hold as well.
Yep. So at this time too, Syria is falling apart. Has fallen apart, and now to the point now that even the unit at the time that was in Tripoli, they're going to wrap up a few more folks, and they're like, okay, we're out, we're done here. We got to go. We got to go to Syria. So that's when they started doing all their operations in that area of the world, and because all the bad guys that need to be wrapped up in Libya were apparently wrapped up at the time, and they're like, okay, we're not going to just sit here and wait for something. There's something already going on. So that was the other thing too, trafficking foreign fighters into Syria. Libya was part of that. So that was part of the rat line for foreign fighters to get into Syria at the time. There was weapons we were trying to find. That was like the primary mission. Where did all the weapons go that Gaddafi had? They just disappeared, right? And so they didn't just disappear. They're being used elsewhere. Where are they going? And Syria was one of those places. So that became a new mission. But as far as the politics at the time and the policies and the agency mission and all that stuff, we weren't there to track that. It became something, but that's not. So the agency can't just transition in place. They have to stop something and get new people to start a new thing. So the people I was with in Libya are great people. And they were saying that to headquarters at the time, we can make the transition. We're here. I can do that job too. It's intel collecting and, we're the same people, right? And we know the area, we know the militias, we know all the militia commanders, everything. It's just not an inherent agency thing to do. It's like restart again from the beginning with new people and all that other stuff, which would have been the worst thing ever to understand the environment on the ground, right? Yeah. The militia dynamics, Haftar and what he's doing, what he's saying he's doing and what he's actually doing on the ground, two totally different things most of the time. What his true intent was and all this other stuff, right? The people on the ground knew that. So we're being told if it's going to turn into a tactical intel collecting environment, then that's not what you guys are there for. So we're going to pull you out. And the guys on the ground is like, well, but we have the capability and the ability to stay here and keep tracking on the situation, like on the ground. How good does that get, right? Yeah. But the good thing about that whole situation is militias are fighting each other. Haftar's doing his thing. Excuse me. And when you're on the ground like that, and you know the ground truth, like literally, it's pretty easy to figure out stuff, right? And figure out how to navigate through all this stuff. and the truth about who needs to be in charge and who needs to not be in charge. And so we asked for permission to, so it got so bad at the time. So literally Libya is on fire. It's burning. It's burning. Everything is burning. It's on fire. Militias fighting each other. Rockets and dishkas just launch. It's a mess.
Mm-hmm.
It's chaos. And during that time, some of the assets, they couldn't make it across town anymore because you have to cross militia lines to get to where we were, and we have to cross to get to them, and it was just impossible. So, guess what we can't do? Our collectors can't collect information. They can't talk to their people because they're either disappearing or dropping off the radar because they're hiding, or whatever reason they can't make it to us. We can't make it to them. So smarter heads prevail, and we're like, well, if we can't do our jobs, we're gonna have to sit this one out. But we're not gonna sit here because we're in the crossfire of two militias shooting at each other, and so it's not a safe place to hide. So for months, we're just sitting in the middle of this internal war. We can't do nothing about it. And we're having to run, and we're getting rockets and shot at, and we're not getting shot at directly, and they're not targeting us. We're just in the middle of this crossfire.
Yeah, shit's close.
Yeah. And then it was getting so unsafe that it was a decision to, let's just move out of town. So from the chief on down out there in the field, just the best people in the agency collectively that I've worked with, and there's a couple of toads in there that were worthless, but that's always the case. But the chief, the upper management there, the case officers I was working with, perfect for that situation. So when you talk about the difference between Benghazi 2012, Tripoli 2014, it's when everybody worked together and talked about things that are happening, and we're really collectively focused on accomplishing the mission. That's how it works, and then that's how it doesn't work. It worked. It was the best thing I've probably been associated with, throughout the whole thing. Just getting it ready, getting it approved. So our chief has to ask headquarters and all that stuff. They have to get all this stuff approved. And so he was able to do that. He afforded us the opportunity to do the things that we needed to do, whatever that was, to help us survive this whole mess over there, whether it was we were going to stay or whether we were going to leave. So we developed those plans. If we stay, how's it going to look? If we leave, how's it going to look? And that's how that ended up going down at the end too. It's like we were going to stay outside of the city. We're going to park some people out in the desert at a safe house, and then everybody else is going to go to Tunis or back to wherever they could in Europe or something to support us. And that's the plan we actually got approved to do, and we set it up. We had a place in town to stay and hide, and we had a place out of town to stay and hide, and track what was going on in the battlefield, the battle space, and affect another re-entry when it all calms down, because it usually does at one point.
Hopefully.
Yeah. And so that gets approved. We're getting ready to execute, and that's when we roll over to the embassy to tell the ambassador that, okay, don't worry about us. We're good. We're gonna leave. And we didn't say exactly what we were doing, like we're gonna leave, because there was gonna be some people that go to Tunis and get to Tunis and wherever else they were gonna go to support us. And there was gonna be a team that stays back. So we're not disclosing that to anybody except our headquarters back in DC. And that gets approved. And however that gets conveyed to the ambassador, then we'll convey that to the ambassador when time comes. And time came, we went over there to do that. And long story short, it's like we said, this is what we're going to do. And ambassador said, wait, what? You're leaving? we want to come with you. So we're talking a lot of people that were still there, including their third country nationals that were doing all their work on their compound, the Bengalis that were there down at another camp that they were responsible for. So it was like 186 or something like that, total people that were going to say, hey, we want to go with you. And we were talking about like 6 vehicles going down the road. Now it's like 50 vehicles. And we're like, well, we can't do what we wanted to do if we have 50 something vehicles now. Plans. Yeah. And our chief at the time, he is like, when we gave her that message, the ambassador, she's on the phone with DC. She's like, wait a minute. And they called DC. This is something I didn't know about. And this is a plan we've been working on and making, like preparing for months. And she wanted to do other things, I guess. So she calls Ambassador Kennedy back in DC, State Department, and asks, instead of doing their plan, because what the State Department usually does, it's called a neo operations. And that takes time. It takes time to notify people that we're leaving. It takes time to notify the notification process to American citizens, one, or dual citizens, American and Libyan, and anybody else that comes under the purview of the U.S. Embassy, which is quite a few folks, right? So they're waiting for notification to go out to get to them, and then notification back. So they're staging their evacuations based off of that. So there's weeks and months into this plan that they have, and that's a normal plan that every embassy has. And it's like, well, we can be out of here in a day. Mm-hmm. We could be sitting out in the middle of the desert. That team, the other team's already gone doing their thing. So it was like, so from our perspective, it's like, okay, we're gonna take the burden from you to be responsible for us. It's like, account for us as gone, and you're good to go, right? The ambassador calls back at that briefing and says, wait a minute, our friends over at the annex said they have a way out, and they're going like in 2 days or whatever. They're rolling out of here in 2 days, every one of them. Locking up, they're burning stuff right now. Destruction plan is in process, it's been in process. They'll be done and gone by this date. And she's like, no more planes are flying. No more commercial aircraft are flying. And that had since stopped. And she gets the approval to go with us as we're sitting there. And it's like, as that conversation is going on, we're listening to this, and there's 3 or 4 of us that are sitting there, and it's like, our plan doesn't include all these people. So how are we going to do this? And then it became, well, I guess we're abandoning plan 1 and staying, and we're all going, because it's all hands on deck at that point. And that's how it ended up being. Very not contentious in a deliberate, mean way, but we said, okay, at one point, it's like, okay, we just dropped plan A, we're going to plan B, we're going out 100% with you guys. And we're going to facilitate everybody's egress. So me and 2 other primary planners for that whole thing, there was about 3 or 4, 5 of us, including our task force team lead, half a dozen at most, and directly planning this whole thing. And so we rejiggered the plan a little bit, told our State Department counterparts who had just got there. They replaced the whole regional security office staff and assistants, the Bureau of Diplomatic Security guys, and the last plane flying in and out of Tripoli, they replaced their whole staff at the worst possible time. So none of the new guys on their side knew anything, how to get around the streets, how to even, where they're even going. And so we took full responsibility for everybody in the embassy, and we started task organizing that stuff. And one of the things that had just happened at our place was we had built a back fence. So little things that happen that affect the big picture, right? Small little communication glitch. They didn't know our facility. They came over to our facility, the new guys, to look at it. And this is okay. This is cool. You guys are doing got cool shit going on over here. And one of the things that wasn't ready when they took their tour was the back gate. And at one point, the last briefing we had when they decided to come with us, we told them, you're going to have to come through the back gate. Otherwise, you're going to be stopped on the street, and everybody's going to see you, and everybody's going to know what we're doing and all that stuff. And then the morning of departure, they arrive at the front gate. It's like, what are you doing? What are you doing?
Naturally.
Yeah. It's like, what are you doing? Now we have to, it's a shit show now.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's like, oh my God. So yeah, working with those guys, they're pretty good at what they do, but in those kind of environments though, it's not where they're at. It's not even their thing.
Yeah.
Right. So, we were totally in control of that for most of that stuff. And then the ambassador just being impatient and all of her little things going on. It worked out. We got everybody out, unscathed, no firefights, nobody hurt, nobody injured, nothing, it worked out. And we got the Tunis, got the State Department to where they needed to be, got our folks out, and almost immediately the agency started working on a way to get back in. And it was like, we had a plan.
Right? We were good to go. Let me ask, was there any situation that you guys faced when you were operating security? Like I said, like maybe going to meet with assets or anything where that asset was made and you guys found yourself walking into an ambush or planned firefight or anything, whatever country it might be in?
It's hard to say because, yes. So in route to a meeting, right? Things go south real quickly, and we have to abandon the meeting and go back to base. It's hard to say whether that was ever like a planned event.
Mm-hmm.
It happened several times. So it was hard to determine whether that was ever a planned event. And what was it? It was a GRS. Or whether it was just the environment that we're in. We just happened to run into these dudes who wanted to shoot us.
Yeah.
That was the first thing on the intent. It's like as we're hightailing it back to the base, it's like one of those things. Hey, talk to that dude. Get a hold of your guy and see what he's doing right now, because he might have just crossed the line, right? What is his true intent? Early on in the war, or even I'm going to say early on in the war, because a lot of times they got people on the payroll and weren't so productive on intel, but they stayed on the payroll. So we meet guys, way into the global war on terror, 10, 12, however long we were in it, that had been on the payroll for a while, really weren't significant people, but they were still on the payroll. Initially, some guys, those are the worst. The initial contacts, the initial physical contacts are always the worst ones, because those are always the possible things, especially further on in the war we go. It's like 2009 in Khost, right?
Could you speak to that? Yeah, I know that's been.
Yeah, there's so that was always the fear, right? And who knows if you're going to a meeting and something happens, whether that was a planned event or it was just a circumstance of the environment, right? But Balawi back in 2009, he did exactly, that was his plan from the start, to kill Americans. And he fooled everybody. So I say he worked the case officers better than the case officer worked him.
Mm-hmm.
He turned the tables on him. and eventually ended up doing what he wanted to do, kill Americans. I had just assumed the country responsibility for the GRS teams in Afghanistan when that happened, like 3 weeks before that. And I'm getting a sense of what's happening on the ground in Afghanistan because I spent all that time to that point in Iraq. And totally different operational environment, totally different support that we were providing to the case officers at the time, different interactions with the military. It didn't really need to be that way, but it was. For some reason, Afghanistan is just a weird place to be, right?
Yeah.
Just different in a lot of ways. But yeah, perfect example. That guy, he works himself. So as I'm getting, even when I arrive in December of 2009, like the same month that he blows himself up and kills Americans, I'm getting a sense of what we're doing in Afghanistan and how GRS is supporting the mission out there. And I'm hearing about this guy, and I heard about him before I left, and some of the team leaders that had been out there to try to support it. And they were there when he had canceled meetings before at Khost. And as I'm preparing to even go to Afghanistan and take the reins out there as a senior GRS guy, I talked to some guys who have been out there, and they're saying, "Hey, man, you got to watch this this case in certain places too, but Khost is one of them." And I said, "This guy they keep pandering to this guy, and he keeps canceling meetings and coming up with excuses. And there's just something about this dude, right?" So from a GRS perspective on the ground, yeah, this guy's needs a little bit more attention than what he's being given. And eventually they pretty much give him free rein of the base to do what he wants to do. So the guy that was out there at the time, Scott Robertson, who was the team leader at Khost, I get on the ground and I'm calling guys on the system, on the phone, asking them, what can I do to support you? How's everything, going on your base? I'm here. I'm the new guy now, and I'm in charge. I knew Scott, and I knew most of the team leaders that were out there. And I'm getting a sense of how I'm requesting from them, how are you guys doing business on the bases and all that stuff? He tells me about this one thing that's going on. And so the thing at Khost too, though, it was very when I get to Afghanistan in 2009, I was there in 2007, then I go there for a full year in 2009. My first observations of our operations out there was like, how did this not progress? Like I was in Iraq. Iraq was after Afghanistan. So how have I been in Iraq and we've progressed? Just living conditions, operational stuff. Nothing's like streamlined at this point. There's no like method to the madness anymore. It's like, and my first observation, first opinion was, what did we just jump in yesterday or what? I mean, we've been here for how long? How are we still not at another spot in this part of the war? And as I'm asking everybody what's going on, my impression of how we were supporting operations out there, it's like, how have we not standardized something yet, right, on how we do business? And guess what? We're getting pushback at Khost. The GRS team leader out there, he's getting pushback. He wants to do this stuff a certain way.
Of course.
And the chief's like, no, we're not going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that in mind, I talked to two other team leaders that were out there previous that were on that base when he was supposed to have shown up, and he canceled for some reason. And he did that. So he was totally in control of that whole situation. My opinion and my assessment, but also the opinion and assessment of a lot of other folks that read his book, The Triple Agent, tells you the whole story, which is a great book to read on how he actually did that. But as I get ready to go out there, ask all the folks that were out there before, how's things happening? And they're like, we can't do what we want to do for this particular guy. It's like, and some other things too. Because of who was in charge out there. I was like, okay, well, in my mind, I'm okay. Maybe we don't need to be there then. If they can do it themselves, then that's fine. We'll let them do it themselves. And that wasn't the case, but
like never is.
yeah. And so similar to Benghazi 2012, 3 years after that, the team leader on the ground he's not being listened to. They're not listening to anything this guy wants to say because he's being looked at as, knuckle dragger. No, we're going to treat him a different way. And all that needs to happen is, so Scott, we're talking, and he wants to, our job is to make sure that nobody else, bad thing, we deal with bad people. That's part of the job. And he's another bad person. So the level that we need to trust him, he hasn't established that yet. So he hasn't established that in our minds. So Scott, he wants to do everything more traditionally GRS, which I totally agree with. We don't know this guy. We never met this guy. So I want to search him. I want to get hands on this dude personally, right? And this is going to happen outside of base somewhere. We're going to go meet him. Done it millions and hundreds of times before. We're going to meet this guy. It's only going to be us. We're going to put ourselves at risk so others will be safer. And then once we make sure this guy is safe, he's not carrying a bomb, doesn't have weird guns, he's not whatever's happening in the car's not rigged to blow. We're going to do what we can to make sure everything's safe before he gets close to our people. That's all he wanted to do. And this is going to happen off-site somewhere, off the base, which is very common to do. That's not what was going to happen. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, I was talking to Scott, and I said, well, you can, if you're not being listened to, or if you don't think you're going to be able to do your job, then that's fine. You can always refuse to support the mission. Because if they don't need you, you can say, okay, just let them do it themselves. If their decision is it's so safe they don't need you, then okay, you don't have to force yourself on them. It's okay to refuse support. So he thought about it, decided to do that at one point, and then so the dynamics, the physical location of people at the time, he made a decision that, well, we're here, and they're like, this meeting is going to go on. If this guy's so important, this meeting is going on right there. I mean, literally, like, I don't know, 50 feet away from where our team room is. So what else are we going to do? What else are we here for? Let's try to get in and do something. And so what ends up happening is exactly what he's able to do, with some exception. So the final decision is, okay, everybody will get set up in the big meeting room inside. They have a birthday cake and all this other stuff for this dude. And they're going to want nobody Afghanistan on the gate, because they were on the gate. We have Americans that are overseeing our security, Afghanistan security staff, trained and vetted. We can't have any Afghanistan people out there. They might be recognized. And so they're told to look away or stand off, and the only Americans will be there managing the gate. And let them through. Don't stop them. Don't question them. Don't do anything. Don't search. Don't do anything. I don't want you guys to offend my guy. So for the sake of rapport, we don't want to spook the guy. We don't want to upset the guy, and all this other stuff is the general concept ideas. And so Scott decides, well, at least when the car stops before he goes into this meeting, he asks for that. Let me just do that last thing before he goes into this meeting. And so they finally are approved and okay to when the car stops, yes, you can look and see, but don't. And that was the thing.
Yeah, don't intimidate him.
Don't touch him.
Yeah.
We don't want him to think that we don't trust him. I was like, well, we don't.
Yeah.
Right.
We shouldn't.
Yeah. And so the folks that were supposed to be inside at one point, they make their own decision to come outside, and they want to greet him outside. So they come out from the meeting room. It's a big room, like a conference room size place. And they come outside and they form this little line, like a greeting line, like welcome to our little camp, right? And this is the shit sandwich that Scott has to deal with. Car pulls up. And he realizes, something is not right about this dude, starts barking commands, pointing guns. And the guy detonates himself and kills 7, including all of our guys, or 3 or 4 of our guys, wins the 4th guy. He just died a couple years ago. But yeah, just worst thing ever imaginable happens. And the worst part about that is everybody was saying, like all the GRS guys were all saying,
yeah, you saw it coming 100 miles away.
This is not right. Yeah. And so, yeah, and it was one of those contentious relationships. And from a lot of people that said, why wouldn't you pay attention to that guy that was there? So Scott was very experienced. He'd been working in Ramadi and I think a couple other places too in Iraq for years before he did that. Then he volunteers to come full-time staff onto the CIA. And then that's his first team leader position. But it's not the first time he's been doing GRS work. Not the first time he's been in harm's way. Not the first time he's been in weird situations. And she just didn't want to hear it. She didn't want to hear it from a lot of folks on that base as far as anything that was going to appear to be aggressive or, ruin her rapport with this guy before she meets him. Yeah, it was bad. People make bad decisions and people get hurt, and people die in war zones, right? But this is something that it pissed me off and pisses off a lot of people. And it's like, you know what? This was foreseeable. So that's what even upsets me to this day when I think about it. It's like, you know what? That's something that people saw that coming, or they even if it was just a thought that they had. Those are the situations that if you think about it, I don't feel good about it, and I need to ramp it up a little bit. That's what our guys are there for. Listen to our guys. They've been doing it for a while. Mm-hmm. They can make these decisions pretty based off of, experience, one, and for that individual guy, two, what do we know about this guy? Nothing. So I'm going to treat him a certain way because I know nothing about this guy. He gets the full, we're not going to hood him and cuff him and, strip him down and all that stuff, which I have done meeting new guys for the first time. So that's when you're allowed to do things. Yeah, I totally had guys take their clothes off and you give them clothes to wear on the base. So he gets totally naked and you don't, and if he has anything in his clothes and he's hiding it, he's not hiding it anymore.
Yep.
And you give him new clothes to wear while he's on base, and then okay, change into your own clothes before you leave. So, I mean, those are things that we were doing in a lot of cases, but that was not going to happen at that base. And unfortunately, bad things happened. People died, including herself. Yeah, it just wasn't a good situation. That was something where our guy knew best, and it doesn't always happen that way, but our guy knew best and should have went down a different way.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like this is what we were speaking to a little bit earlier, and you hear this time and time again. It's just the ignorance when it gets in the way of just sound decisions, or, it feels like a case officer wants to make sure this asset, provide, like, pays dividends. So they're like, oh, no, we can skip a few steps. And once you skip steps is when destruction happens.
Yeah, and the decision to skip steps, take shortcuts or whatever. Mm-hmm. Or what is that based off of? Right? Okay, that's great if you know something that we don't know, but just let us know that you know something we don't know, and we'll maybe think other things about it. But that wasn't the case. It was all based off of, and there probably was, even in, I think in the I don't know if it was an official report, but one of the reports internally, I was like, maybe there was too much pressure placed on her to do something. Okay. Not my issue, right?
And if you hear that, you're still not going to be like, oh, well, that changes it. Like, we'll skip steps. It's like, no, if there's pressure coming from the top, we need to address the fact that you're getting the pressure to skip fucking steps that are vital to security. Like,
yeah. And that's one of the things that you don't, well, and I say you don't forego security for sake of, getting information, all of this, but it's kind of was the nature of the business at the time, because there's a lot of risks that we had to mitigate and manage and accept in order to get things done. But that was to the extreme of not knowing, making it on the GRS side of the house. He's having to make a decision, not knowing the full picture. And for a lot of reasons, he wasn't given the full picture. I was, all compartmented and all this other stuff, super secret stuff that they couldn't disclose. I get it. So that also contributed to the decisions that were made. But it was bottom line is it was not the right decision, and people died as a result of it, died and injured.
So wrapping up here too, I want to, jump into your post GRS career, post working, pretty much everything we spelled out today. Obviously, you were doing, some of the craziest shit around the world, but you're continuing to do some amazing things now. So if you want to talk about, your company and kind of what you've done post military, I'm sure the viewers love to hear that, because we were talking all week, and that's what got us going for like 2 hours today before we jumped on the podcast.
Yeah. So Ninja Bob Solutions. We provide a lot of things, all the hard skill stuff, pistol, various levels of pistol training, rifle, carbine stuff, from very beginners. And that's really what my thing is, even on the website. If you have sidearm, let's train you how to use it safely and be safe with it. But also teach and emphasize, this isn't the end all be all solution. There's other things you need to do besides learn how to shoot a gun and using it in self-defense. But it's also recreational shooting and competition shooting, if that's what they're into. If they have sidearm, we'll train you how to use it better. Or it's also tactics too. If I'm talking to or working with SWAT teams or military, absolutely. It's fun shit, right? I love doing it. So absolutely, everything from beginners to SWAT teams, experts doing it. Work with them all, and tailored classes, private classes, all women's classes. I've had those. So a beginner's a beginner. And the situational awareness stuff we were talking about earlier. So it's all those things about. And I incorporate that in all of my training, situational awareness. Right? It's not just shooting a gun. So what happens before that? Your awareness of the situation and evolve to that point and avoid that confrontation. Identify threats and eliminate the noise for you to make decisions. Rely on your basic instincts that you were born with. Make honest assessments on people and things and feelings. If you feel like something's going wacky, it probably is. Mm-hmm. Don't avoid those feelings that you get, the hair on the back of your neck and chicken skin and all those kind of things. Those are natural occurrences that happen as a result of you seeing something and you're just not processing it correctly. Get back to the gut instinct. What is your gut telling you kind of stuff, right? Make an assessment, avoid, right? See the threat before it sees you and see it before it sees you and then avoid it. But when you can't, know how to defend yourself. And it's gone over pretty good. I like it. And it's really comes from all my experience in the direct action world and the covert, clandestine, more GRS world and operating in clandestine, low profile environments where it's just me and another person that has to be super aware of what's going on to avoid confrontation.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's no one that I would trust more with that. At some point, I'm getting up to West Virginia. We're gonna link up and we'll make a video out of it. But yeah, I gotta heat up my shooting. I'm getting better with skeet shooting recently. I finally like learned that, but need to get out with a little bit more and stuff. It's taken fucking forever to get a Texas license, or we've been doing something here because it takes 4 months to get an appointment at the DMV right now.
Oh wow,
How crazy is that?
Yeah.
So it's like can't get an ID, so then you can't get a gun or anything. It's just
shit.
But yeah, that'll all be linked below. And Bob, it's an honor to have you on the podcast today, my man. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
There, but yeah,
Yeah, thanks for having me.
of course, brother. It was an awesome conversation, and like I said, I hope we get to do it again. We'll get you back down here, but I'm gonna get up there at some point. We're gonna shoot some guns, and make some videos.
Absolutely, yeah, it'll be fun.
Forever, brother. Appreciate it.